Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners.
That persistence, that keep on going, get yourself up, dust yourself off, get back in the race kind of mentality is what has allowed me to be successful in my career.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I am your host once again, Billy Keels, and I'm so happy to welcome you back to today's conversation because you are going to absolutely love this. We actually have a Tony Award winner on the show today. It's going to be awesome. This guy's got a great story. It is going to be super cool. I know you're going to get so much out of this conversation. And also too, for those of you that continue to be here, continue to listen, continue to download, continue to share with your friends. If you have not had a chance to leave an honest written review as well as a rating, if you could take just a couple of seconds to do that, that would be great. Because you know what? Those of you that have already done that, you help us to continue to move up the charts. You are continuing to listen more and it's amazing. So thank you so much for all of your support. And like I said, if you haven't had a chance and you've been really putting it off, just go ahead and do it really quickly. Especially on the Apple podcast platform. We've got a little video, click it, and it'll show you how to do it. Also, for those of you who also want to check out like really old versions of the podcast and you cannot find it on your favorite podcast platform, go to billykeels.com. When you get to billykeels.com, just check out the podcast tab. Go there, click, you'll be able to see every single episode, video version, audio version, it will be awesome. So anyway, listen, today's conversation is really awesome. Have someone who started in the performing arts, who got into IT, had some really great experiences, had some, I guess he would call it luck along the way, but what he did with that luck was absolutely amazing. And what he's doing today and how he is living a long distance investing lifestyle, serving others and living his best life is really amazing. So you're gonna get a number of golden nuggets out of this conversation with Matt Picheny, and it's gonna be absolutely awesome. So check it out. You're gonna get to that just after this. If you want to know how Brilliance on Broadway can lead to your long distance investing success, then guess what? You're going to want to listen to today's conversation until the very last word, I promise. You know why? Because today's guest, not only started his own production company when he really started his professional career, at least as far as we know. He may tell us something different. You know what? He also has deep industry knowledge in both media as well as advertising. He has commercial real estate licenses as well as real estate finance licenses. He's also a certified project management professional. And get this, he is a Tony Award winner turned real estate investor as well as founder of his own company that I'll tell you about just in a second. But guess what? He's also a best-selling author. His book is Backstage Guide to Real Estate Investing. And I'd love for you to meet Mr. Matt Picheny. Matt, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, Billy, thanks for having me on. What a wonderful introduction. That was really nice.
Well, you rock, man. I was all nervous, thinking, oh my gosh, here we go. Yeah, and if I've missed any of that kind of stuff, we'll talk about it in just a second. You can correct all of it, But here's the thing, Matt, loved your energy from the pre-conversation. I know that the entire Going Long family is going to get massive value out of this conversation. I can already feel it. And as you know, I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You're going to get 2 in the beginning. You're going to get 3 in the end. In the middle, you're going to get some more questions. I just don't know what those questions are yet. So if it's all right with you, I just want to ask you the first one. Help the Going Long family understand, where is it that you live in the U.S.?
I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Wow. Brooklyn, New York. That sounds like a very popular city. I think most people probably know where that is.
It's very well known. It's very well known. And it's a great place to live. Been back here for about 9 months now. But before that, and I'm sure we'll get into it as we tell my whole story, I lived in New York for like 23 and a half years. So I like New York a lot.
Yeah, New York. The city's so nice. They named it twice, I guess is what they say. So
yeah, that's right.
Also, Matt, can you do us a favor? Can you help share with us what's the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Besides spending time with my kids From a business perspective, we just closed out on raising capital on a new deal. So that's exciting.
Fantastic.
But yeah, spending time with kids is kind of number one on my list.
You know what? I love that. And I love it so much that is number one on your list, because at the end of the day, Matt, and you know this, that's what really counts, man. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's to get the quality time with the people that we love when we want to have that time, and being able to have the freedom to do that. So thank you so very much for sharing that, because that is awesomely positive. The other thing is, Matt, I have to be very open and transparent with you in the first couple of, I guess, minute and a half of knowing you, that I try to do something that's almost impossible to do. It's because I like to keep the standard really, really high, in that I try to tell your entire backstory, Matt, in like 2.5 seconds.
All right.
Just, it makes no sense, but I try every time. And you've done way too much. You've impacted way too many lives, but I have to at least try it. So the Going Long family, they forgive me after every single conversation or during the conversation. And hopefully you'll forgive me for trying to do that in 2.5 seconds. But more importantly, Matt, would you mind helping me out? Would you mind helping me out by you telling your backstory in your own words, number one? And then also, if you could help us as well, talk to us while you're telling your backstory about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey. And then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Great. And it's a long story, so feel free to interrupt. So have you been to Disney World?
Yes, I have, a couple times.
Okay. So I grew up in Orlando, Florida. And so Disney World was a big part of my life growing up. And I actually ended up working at Disney World when I was a kid. I performed in front of the castle in the Magic Kingdom.
Oh.
And I really enjoyed performing and acting, and did that in community theater and lots of different things, and High School Musical and all of that. And I decided that I wanted to pursue a career as an actor. And I moved to New York City. And that was in 1992. And to pursue a career in theater, I went to a musical theater conservatory, graduated from there, and was off on the road for about 5 years. I did 15 different productions throughout the country. It was a lot of fun. I started tinkering around with computers as something that was a little bit of a hobby of mine. And that turned into be a very lucrative option when I wasn't doing acting gigs instead of waiting tables. So I started the computer programming thing. And this was in the 90s, right? This was in the later portion of the 90s. And so the .com, was all the rage, right? Everything was internet. Work was coming in so fast, I couldn't do it all. I ended up starting my own little boutique agency in New York City. And we did website development for companies. Did that for almost 5 years, and the .com bubble burst. And my clients were all going out of business or not spending money on digital marketing. So my business was imploding, right? And it just so happens at that time that my landlord calls me and tells me I've got 90 days to get out of the apartment that I'm living in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was a difficult thing for me, big moment in my life. Oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I find a place to live and without any real job? All in 90 days. This was like, I'm climbing Mount Everest. How is this ever going to come to fruition? I ended up, instead of renting an apartment, I ended up buying an apartment. My sister had been living up in Washington Heights, and she saw a sign on a bulletin board for an apartment for sale, a co-op apartment. And I ended up buying a co-op unit, and I got a job at Showtime, the cable television channel. They were a client of mine. They offered me a position in-house. So I got the job. I bought an apartment all within 90 days, good to go. And about a little over 2 years later, I ended up selling that apartment. And I saw my initial investment in the apartment, that initial down payment, more than quadruple. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? I mean, I had a good salary at this point in time. I was making good money, but in that one transaction, I made more than I made in my yearly salary, right? Yeah. And so this was a huge eye-opening moment for me. And I said, how do I do that again? and that's when I really started to get involved in real estate and trying to figure out, okay, how do I make that, not just on a primary residence, but how do I start investing in that? I ended up using the profits from that sale of that co-op to buy another apartment in New York. And then about a year after that, I bought my first investment property, which was a piece of land, raw land in Connecticut. And a few years later, I built a house on that property, and that became a rental. And so fast forward about 10 years, I'd been doing real estate as a hobby. I'd gotten married. My wife got a really cool job opportunity in Miami, Florida. So we moved to Miami. And that's when I decided to transition from doing real estate as a hobby to doing real estate full-time. So that's when I started investing and both passively and actively investing in real estate. So my portfolio, 2/3 of my portfolio are deals that I am a limited partner passive investor in. Mm-hmm. And those are all over the country. And then I have deals that, almost 3,000 units now that I am a general partner, the asset manager on those properties. And those are located mainly in the South. Mm. And that was about 6.5 years ago that I made that transition into doing that type of thing full time. Since that time, just to catch you quickly back up to how I'm in New York, we then moved from Miami to Boston. My wife got approached out of the blue with a job opportunity in Miami. That's why we moved there. And then again, out of the blue for Boston. My wife's really great at her job. She's awesome. And then they promoted her within that organization, and they wanted her to come back to New York, where the North American headquarters are. And she works in the theater business. Okay. And I used to work in the theater business as an actor. And so from time to time, my wife and I will get involved beyond her day job, which is doing all the business stuff of theater and producing shows. We have sometimes teamed up together to produce some shows that are on Broadway, which is what led me to winning a couple of Tony Awards along with her, we're co-producers on those things. So I always wanted to win a Tony, but I thought it would be as an actor. I'm thrilled to have two is amazing, right? Yeah. And I got him as a co-producer, but I'm happy with that. It's very cool. But my day job is the real estate.
Yeah. Okay. So you have the day job that's the real estate. You have had lots of personal successes along the way. So like you mentioned a lot of different things in your story. Now, what I find to be really interesting is that, number one, you became an accidental, what do you say? Like quadruple, like an investor who quadrupled on an investment, which you weren't really even anticipating, which I think is fantastic. And what it shows is also the power of markets that are appreciation. And at the same time that you could increase by 4 times, that can also decrease by 4 times if you're in that type of a location, right? That type of a market. But what you did was really, really interesting, right? Because a lot of times people would just like let that money either sit in their home or not do anything. But you not only sold, but you took the proceeds. If I understood you correctly, you took the proceeds and then dumped it back into an additional property, which was an investment. Now, did I understand that correctly?
It's not 100%, but kind of, sort of. So
straighten me out.
I did take the proceeds from. So I really wanted to live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. That was like my dream, right?
Okay. Yeah.
That's where I had gone to school and everything. I was living down in Chelsea at the time when I had to move, right? Mm-hmm. And I could find maybe something to rent on the Upper West Side, but my sister was living in Washington Heights, which is about 30 minutes further north.
Okay.
And I sort of made the sacrifice to live up in Washington. And Washington Heights is a nice area, but like it wasn't my desired place to live because I was able to buy something and it was affordable. So then I took the proceeds when I sold that and was able to buy something on the Upper West Side, which is where I'd always wanted to live.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what you did is you were able to, actually, it was more of a bucket list, kind of a real life realization kind of investment, if you will. Would that be accurate?
Well, yeah, I would say that. I mean, the goal was to live on the Upper West Side, right? Yeah. That was something that was unattainable for me at the time. So I made this investment and spent the time and effort. And we did a lot of work on that property, by the way, in Washington Heights. So we had both the real estate market going up, and also we elevated the property itself. We redid the lobbies and the hallways, and I redid my unit. And so, in realizing that profit, I was then able to take those proceeds and move in and reach that goal of living on the Upper West Side.
Okay, perfect. So you use that. So I appreciate you correcting that for me. So maybe it wasn't a financial investment, but you were able to do something which was an intrinsic reward, something that you had wanted to do for your lifetime.
And then I will say, Billy, that when I bought so I bought a piece of raw land in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I put a down payment on from out of my pocket, but when I decided to build on it, I got a construction loan, and part of the deal was that I had to pay off the land. And I did that by refinancing the apartment on the Upper West Side because it had appreciated in value. So I did a cash out refinance, took some of those proceeds, and that's what. So it kind of did allow me in a sort of roundabout way to start going down that path.
So what I want to draw out of the story that you're telling is, because we have a lot of people that are listening and watching us that are high paid professionals that are typically doing the things that I was doing, right? I was in the corporate world for 26 years. I was really happy. I was a high paid corporate sales executive, sales leader. And you tend to go through the routine over and over and over, right? I kind of took one of the, I guess it's the red pill they talk about, and saw some new things in my life and decided to go down another path. But early on, it seemed that you talked about the Disney opportunity, and then you talked about getting into your company, but it's really an entrepreneurial spirit that I understand, or at least I'm taking away from the conversation that you had, because you saw opportunities, you took action, and then from the action that you took, you're telling us about the things that happened positively, which I think is great. I'm sure there were probably some trials and tribulations along the way as well,
sure.
Right? But it just goes to a lot of times, Matt, I think we need inspiration from others that are doing things that maybe inside we are afraid to do, or we're just so busy doing what we're doing that we need that other inspiration, that other insight that I believe you're showing in your story, right? Because I didn't hear you say that you grew up in a home where people were real estate investors or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, so I'll say two things. Number one, I also was doing the corporate thing. I worked in advertising, so maybe not so corporate, but still corporate, climbing that corporate ladder for 18 years. And this was something that I did on the side as a hobby. And I think that I got that entrepreneurial spirit from my parents. I actually mentioned that in the dedication in my book, because both of my parents were entrepreneurial, where my mother had a business, my father had a business, and my father actually was involved as a real estate agent and broker for a few years. And then he moved into the food service industry. So most of my life, he was in the food service industry, but I did have, a bit of exposure to real estate. He never, that at one point, that I also mentioned in the book, there's when I was around 7, he had an investment property with a single family with a couple of partners, I think. But I think they had it for like a year. Like it wasn't like a thing that my dad owned real estate or anything like that. The only thing we really ever owned was our primary residence, which, obviously we had a mortgage on. I wouldn't say that my parents were tremendously successful, but they, put food in our mouths and put clothes on our backs. Right. But I didn't, I didn't have a silver spoon or anything like that.
Okay. So you had some light exposure, you had the corporate experience, and you continued to take action, which, okay. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, wait.
Yeah, as an actor, Billy, I was okay with taking risks because it's a really risky profession. But also, as an actor, when you're on stage, you're making choices. And so I was kind of like, at the beginning, so now I'm a lot more measured in what I do, right? But at the beginning, especially with these first investments and stuff, I was kind of like just flying by the seat of my pants, and by a series of fortunate events, was able to do well. And now looking back at it, I realized that sort of by intuition, I was doing the things that I needed to do. For instance, I was surrounding myself with people who knew what they were doing or knew the area, like the property in Connecticut, right? I was working with a broker who was like one of my best friend's father, who was practically family. And I had him there to advise me and guide me. But also, like when you talk about, a lot of the stuff I do is value add and, in the large multifamily apartment buildings. But as I was writing this book, like I went back and looked at my life as I was telling my story, and I was like, I've done value add like all the time. Like I never knew it was a thing, but like I bought the apartment in Washington Heights. We fixed up the lobby. We fixed up the hallways. We fixed up the unit. The apartment I bought on the Upper West Side, it looked like a skate park because the floors were they were bad. And so I was able to get it in a hot real estate market at a decent price. Went in, fixed the floors, renovated, did built-ins, crown molding, whatever, and made the apartment look a lot nicer. And then was on that co-op board, and we actually renovated that lobby and those hallways. And then I saw the value go up again. And then we moved to Brooklyn. And this, I live here now. But this property, we made a lot of enhancements on. And also, all of these times, well, when I was on the Upper West Side, the real estate market went up, but also went way down. I mean, I was there in 2008. But we've had overall a rising real estate market, but also the areas that I've been investing in and living in have been improving. And so I'm always trying to figure out, okay, where's that path of progress and what can I do to contribute to that progress? How can I make things better for the community?
So what you said earlier, right? You're talking about now understanding the path of progress, being able to also participate in that, helping to enhance the areas that you are in. But also, and Matt, you really talked about that, or you laid it out really well, because sometimes when you're getting started on a smaller scale, you're just preparing for the future. Like you're doing the same things today. The difference is you're just doing it on a much larger scale as you are managing assets, or you are going through a renovation plan, or whatever the case may be. So, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that before I get you to talk to us about the book. A lot of times when you're doing like the smaller units or the smaller multifamily or doing something else to make that big leap to start, now you're responsible for bringing together either a syndication or you're buying your first very large building. I know you talked about it at a very high level, but I know in the portfolio that you are let's say the general principal on, you're in at least three different states, I think. Maybe 7 or 8 different cities. So you're definitely you're here amongst friends here at the Going Long podcast. But what was it like for you to go from those smaller units to your very first, like, boom, we've got a couple hundred units in the portfolio? Yeah,
well, the first large multifamily apartment building that from a management perspective was 132 units. The largest I had before that was a 2-unit. Yep. So that was a big jump.
Pretty significant. Yeah. If you're going to go 60 times whatever it is.
Yeah, sure. So, the duplex, the 2-unit that I had was in Brooklyn. So it wasn't inexpensive, but the 132 unit property was a $10 million acquisition. And, the only way I was able to do that. So, when we moved to Brooklyn, I knew we got a great deal on this property and I wanted to do more, but I just didn't have the money. I was out of money. So, how do you do that? And then I learned about syndication, where a bunch of like-minded investors can pool their capital and their resources together. And so that's how we were able to get that 132 unit. Now, there was about 2 years. That 132 units was 2 years in the making, where I was focused on trying to find that. But then obviously I had the over 10 years of experience prior to that in the smaller scale. So I had learned a lot of the building blocks. And then during those 2 years that I was looking for a property to acquire, I was also passively investing in these larger scale real estate syndications. So as a passive investor, I wouldn't say I was in the passenger seat because I was kind of like in the back of the bus, right? But I was still on the bus, and I was still getting to see what was going on, right? And learning different things by just being a participant in this. I was in 6 different real estate syndications before I did my first one as a sponsor. In some respects, it's very different, but in some respects, it's very similar. You're just adding, a zero or several zeros at the end of the unit numbers or the checks. Some of the things are different, like having to deal with investors, like having to follow SEC compliance rules, like dealing with different financing, because there's different financing on these. It is more of a commercial type financing than the regular 30-year fully amortizing mortgage, which are amazing, which you can get on the 4 units or less. So there are differences, there are variances, there are nuances, but a lot of the mechanics of doing a value add and managing a project are the same. What's really interesting, I think you mentioned it earlier in the intro, I'm a PMI certified project management professional. It means I'm really good at managing people, budgets, and timelines. And I used to do that in the advertising world. And I understand real estate. And I took those same skill sets, right? And those same methodologies that I used and just applied that to real estate.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you talked about that. So there's a couple of things. So you have the smaller assets, the larger assets, definitely more zeros. Also, having more individuals to help you, right, on the larger projects is something else. It adds a level of complexity. Great that you have the background, that you are a certified project management specialist, and in being able to tie these things together. I think a lot of times we forget that we have transferable skills. So something that you were using in your corporate experience is now manifesting itself as you also bring your expertise in real estate and allowing you to continue to grow, continue to add value to others, other people, and all of it meshes together. You've taken it even a step further. And before we get into going along final 3, Matt, I really want you to talk to us about your book, right? Because we talked about it earlier on, Backstage Guide to Real Estate Investing. Talk to me about that. Because a lot of people go through the motions, but they don't take the time to actually sit down and document it and share it and then put it in a book, right? It's hard enough to get people to do like a lead magnet. You've actually taken the time to go out and put it in a book. So talk to us about that.
I ran a meetup when I was in Boston, and the meetup started relatively small and was growing. And the purpose of the meetup was to get people interested in large apartment, right, multifamily apartments, and being comfortable investing out of state. And as the meetup grew and grew, people were getting comfortable with that idea and would be looking at a deal and say, "Hey, Matt, I know you invest passively. I know you're a sponsor. You run the meetup. Will you sit down with me and tell me if this deal that I'm about to invest in is a good deal or not?" And so I said, "Sure, I'll sit down. I'm not going to tell you if it's a good deal or not, but I'll tell you how I would look at this opportunity and the questions that I might ask the sponsor." Great. So 2 hours later, I'm done and move on, and as the meetup grew and grew and grew and more people wanted to do it, it was taking up so much of my time. I was like, I couldn't do my work.
You've got like 80 people done at the end of every session. Come talk to me.
We'd set up, lunches and coffees, but it was just like, I'm driving all over Boston, meeting people all day long. It was too much. Yeah. And so I was trying to figure out how do I pass this knowledge on to people? And so I ended up writing a book. It was a terrible 80-page book that never saw the light of day. It was like chewing cardboard, because all it was all this technical stuff that I would go over with people when I met with them, but it was just really difficult to read. It was just so dense, right? And so then I said, how do I get this information and convey it to people in a way that's actually enjoyable to read, and something that's digestible? And so I decided to basically tell my story and share with the reader as they go along my path of knowing nothing about real estate to doing, air rights and 1031 exchanges, and taking them along my path and sharing with them what I've learned and the 18 different keystone concepts that I found along my way. So the book shares those keystone concepts. There's also 60 different real estate terms that are defined in the book. It's just a really great resource for anyone who's interested in real estate, interested in exploring all the different types of investing. And also, if you're interested in syndication, there's a whole little section at the back of the book that really dives into syndications, like questions to ask sponsors about the market, about the deal. And so it's a resource book, but hopefully, and the reviews seem to say that it's a fun, enjoyable read with some humor. It's not like this boring real estate book, but it is educational.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'm glad you were able to hit those. Number one, you went through version one, then you figured out, okay, well, listen, hang on a second, let's make this nice and entertaining. And so you were able to do that. You're able to come up with the 18 keystone concepts that you talk about, being able to also highlight some of the different key vocabulary that you talked about and you mentioned as well, and even allowing or giving insight into the syndication process and questions to ask. So that's great for both active and syndicators and those that want to passively invest with others. So absolutely fantastic, Matt. And like the thing is, we kind of have to get to the going long final three.
Okay.
And I never ask the going long final three unless you, as our special guest today, Matt, you tell me that you're ready. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
You were born ready. I kind of have a feeling you were born ready, man. Here we go. So, Matt, we started with you over in wonderful Brooklyn. I'd like to bring it back to this side of the pond because now this is my adopted hometown side of the pond here in Barcelona, Spain, as you know. So help us understand, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited, and I happen to know you've visited Europe, or is still on your bucket list to visit?
I mean, is it cheating if I say Barcelona? I mean,
absolutely not, man.
Really
absolutely not.
I had a blast. I've been to London. I like the UK. I've been to France. I've been to Italy, which I really liked a lot. But honestly, if I had to pick one city, my favorite, Barcelona. Hands down. I mean, the architecture, the art, the culture, the food. I mean, it's a wonderful place.
Matt, you had me at Barcelona. I mean, we were good. So cool. So Barcelona, we have another vote for this wonderful city. I guess I have to ask you question number 2. And question number 2 is really about a lot of the insights that I've been fortunate enough to gain from being able to speak to, interact with lots of successful people, a lot of them here on the podcast. I consider you to be someone who's very successful in many different ways in your life. You've made positive impacts on the people that have come into contact with you. And I think that's phenomenal. And hopefully, like from the same insights that you've had, Matt, you would agree with me that one of the reasons that people that are successful tend to be very successful is because when they come up with a plan, they put the plan together. Then it's time to execute the plan. They get things right the first time. And then because of that, they're allowed to continue. I just said that. That was a joke. Don't worry. It was a joke, Matt. Matt's looking at me like, did you just say that? Did you say that? It's a joke. It's a joke. It's an inside joke with me and the Going Long family. Don't worry. I have a lot of fun. Of course, nobody gets things right perfectly the first time. Come on, Matt. I mean, you said it yourself earlier. The book, it was the second version. Look, nobody gets things right the first time, especially successful people. The reason that most people are successful is because they, unlike most people, get things wrong probably 20 to 50 times more frequently than others. But the reality is, and hopefully you agree with this because this is no joke, every single time that there is a relevant mistake or learning opportunity or whatever you want to call it, you know what I mean? The things didn't work out the way they were supposed to. Every single time it's relevant, successful people stop. They learn from the learning opportunity or the mistake, and then they take action to put different strategies, tactics, and different strategies and tactics in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening again. Now, Matt, I don't want you to think about the mistake really, or the learning opportunity, however you want to call it, but really, what is the lesson that you learned from that experience? And most importantly, what is the lesson that you know that the Going Long family needs to learn from that?
Well, persistence is, I think, what you're talking about here. It's keystone concept number 3 in the book. Julie Andrews is attributed with saying that success is failing 19 times, but then succeeding on the 20th, right? And so I talk about it in the book. I've had many times in my life where I've been told no, or I've failed, and I think that what I've learned from that is that persistence, that keep on going, get yourself up, dust yourself off, get back in the race kind of mentality is what has allowed me to be successful in my career as a theater. When I got kicked out of my apartment, I needed to find a place to live and wanted to stay in New York. I found a way to persevere there. And with real estate, 2 years to get my first deal. It's not like I was sitting on my my tush, not doing anything. I was out there and getting a lot of no and facing a lot of rejection. And so having that persistence and being able to continue moving forward has been a driving force in me having any sort of success.
All right, fantastic. So you've heard it here. Keystone concept number 3, right? Staying persistent. So continue to be persistent, Go Along family. And I appreciate you painting the picture for us as well, Matt, which leads us to the last question, which is really about helping us to feed our mind with knowledge. What is the one book? Well, before I say that, and just as a reminder, your book, The Backstage Guide to Real Estate, we'll make sure that we leave a link in the show notes as well. So everybody can check out the 18 different keystone concepts that Matt's talked about. But sorry, and then go back really quickly. But to the one book that you would recommend to the Going Along family today, what would that one book be?
Well, there's so many great books out there that have been monumental in my life. But I always tend to turn to the book that I'm reading right now.
Yep.
And so right now I'm reading a book by R.E.I, and it's called Principles for the Changing World Order. And it's really interesting. He's going back and looking, and this is sort of his methodology. He goes back and looks at history and looks for patterns and market cycles and things of that nature. And so he's looking at that, going back to ancient, Roman and China, all these, different cultural, cycles that have happened, and then trying to sort of apply that to where we are, like right now in 2022. And so it's a really great book. So I would recommend that one, Principles for the Changing World Order by R.E.I.
Awesome. Principles for the Changing World Order. Mr. R.E.I. We'll make sure we include that in the show notes as well. Matt, every single conversation, like they all fly by. Like this conversation, I feel like we were just starting the conversation and you telling us about you living in Orlando, Florida, and from Orlando that you were performing and you were there in front of Magic Kingdom, which I think would be awesome. I'm sure you've got some pictures you could share with us. And then you'd even gotten into, in 1992, I think you said you did 15 different productions. Like that's phenomenal. You got into the IT space. You were doing web development. Things were working well. And then the .com bubble kind of happened. You figured, hey, listen, I need to kind of reinvent myself. I need to figure out what's going on. You went to New York City and you had some pretty nice quadruple equity, which is never a bad thing, right? It allowed you to get to a bucket list item that you had for yourself. And then you were even able to start to parlay that and got up into the Connecticut area and just continue to be able to, not just have success overnight. You even talked about it. Like once you decided you wanted to do things bigger, it took you 2 years, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
And even in spite of that, like you continue to move forward. You continue to, as you say, persist. Keystone concept number 3, right? Check it out. And I know that people are thinking to themselves, like the Going Along family, they're like, Billy, will you just ask him the question already? And so the thing is, all this awesome stuff you've done, I'm sure that there are so many people that just want to figure out, like, how can they get in touch with you? How can the Going Along family find out more about what you're doing, Matt, more about your book? How can we get in touch with you, man? Help us.
Best thing to do is to go to my website. It's Picheny.com. And I'm sure you'll put a link to that in the show notes, but real quick, I'll spell it. It's P like in Peter, ICHENY.com. The great thing about the website, I post really great educational real estate information on there on a monthly basis. I have a monthly newsletter that's got tons of investor tips in there. There's also information on the book if you're interested. So go to Picheny.com and check it out. I think it's a good resource for people.
All right, Picheny.com. And yes, Matt, we will include that in the show notes as well. So don't worry if you're running on the treadmill or cooking dinner or something like that. All you're going to have to do is click a link. We make it really, really simple for you. So Matt, listen, thank you so much for investing your time with me and the entire Going Long family. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
That was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. You're an awesome host. I think that's why it went so quickly and smoothly. So thanks for having me as a guest.
All right. Thank you so much. Hey, Matt, can you give me like 10 seconds just to say the final words to the family?
Yeah.
Everybody listen. Matt made it really, really awesome. He's got an amazing book. He's got real life, real world experience. He's an active investor. He's a passive investor. He's got so much that he can share with you. He just can't talk to everybody at once, which is why he wrote a book, which is a pretty cool thing. So take today's conversation, share it with your friends, share it with your family, and most importantly, talk about it. That's how you're going to start to develop new ideas, new ways of thinking. You're going to start to go from just the theory into practice. And also, like I said, Matt's given you, he made it really easy to get in touch with him. So while you're doing all of that, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much.